So I went to see The Invite a couple hours ago, and I was definitely the youngest in the theater. And maybe that shaped my perspective on how I seen this movie a certain way. But there's two major things I wanted to talk about today, and one of those was the brutal fear of being average. And, I feel like that is so palpable through Seth Rogen's character throughout this movie. Um, and I don't know if, like I said, if that's how everybody else sees it, but for me, being 23 and coming from a generation that I feel like is one of the biggest culprits of this fear and culprits of also doing exactly what Seth Rogen's character does in the movie, which is just shut down once you have to accept this reality. And what I mean by this is I have asked myself, at times, I have aspirations to act, and obviously I do my content and stuff, and I've asked myself, could I be the guy that just, got with a girl from my hometown, have a kid or two, get a house? And the truth of the matter is, I don't know if that would honestly fulfill me. Um, I think I would. I think on this earth, I want to prove to myself that I'm a dope enough content creator, that I'm a dope enough actor. And how do you prove that to yourself and to the world? And what happens if you don't? And Seth Rogen's character in The Invite is exactly that to me. We all, especially my generation, I think we fear being average, even though average is norm. That's the norm. That's the majority, and that's what we fear. Isn't that fascinating? Something that is a majority of people's lives, and that most of us are leading to, is something we don't even enjoy. And so then we find ourselves like Seth Rogen's character in The Invite, just completely unhappy, completely miserable, feel like a failure. And so it's almost like when your account is negative and you just don't want to look at it. It's the same in life. It's a lot easier to live in a false sense of reality and never bring up the actual truth, because sometimes people don't realize saying the truth out loud makes it real. So we as humans, it's easier to just pretend and not say anything, which leads me to my second biggest point with a movie like The Invite, which is when two people completely stop talking. And this was another big takeaway from this movie, which is, what happens when you're in a couple and both of you just stop communicating about what you like, about what you don't like about each other, and before you know it, you have two different perspectives, two different reasons, and there's never any communication, never any flow. I found it so fascinating in this movie that Seth Rogen's character and Olivia Wilde's character both look at the other and say they stopped sleeping with me. Olivia Wilde says he stopped sleeping with me, and he says she stopped sleeping with me. And it's so amazing, it's so fascinating to see two different perspectives on the same issue. And it's so easy how we can do that when we stop communicating with our partners, with our people. I can sit here and say, yeah, you stop wanting to have sex with me. And she can sit there and look at me and say the same exact thing. And I said, damn, is this what happened when couples just stop communicating completely? When I'm not satisfied, I'm not fulfilled in my own life. And so I'm constantly miserable. I'm constantly bringing you down. And so you kind of just end up breaking your woman. Because she did seem like a broken woman, like she was tired of trying to speak life into this guy. But also, I don't think she was that happy within herself. So what happens when neither of you are happy, but you don't have the balls or the gall to say it, and you both know it, but it's easier to just keep pretending? And I love Penelope Cruz, who was looking mighty beautiful in this movie. I love that line delivery she gives where she says, and you think, because they say they stay together for their kid, right? And I love how she says, do you think your kid doesn't notice? Do you think your child would prefer single but happy parents, or two people staying together who are absolutely miserable just for her? And one of the other scenes, to go back to just being, average, and that fear that my generation clearly has of this quote unquote average life. I also love when Olivia Wilde's character tells Seth Rogen that, um, you have, you get to teach and still get to have music in your daily life. It's just like some of my friends that didn't necessarily make it to the NBA, but now they get to do training or coaching, or they're doing the content creating. Like, yo, it may not be the NBA like you wanted, but hey, you still get to make money and have this thing you loved in your day-to-day life. You also have a family, a girlfriend and a wife at home, maybe with your dog, with a nice house. A lot of people would kill for this life, but for some reason we fear the average so much that that's not even what crosses our mind. Because in our mind, we need to be validated that we are special. We have a purpose. And what happens when you don't get that validation? When your band fails, and so now you're a music high school teacher and you absolutely hate it. Talking music to people who don't care about music. And I found myself really feeling for Seth Rogen's character because, like I said, this is a question that I think shapes my generation. And this is a question that I've asked myself 1,000 times over and over and over again. If I found a girl right now from my hometown that I just super loved, or not even from my hometown, just I went out and she was super perfect. But that would mean, just staying at my stable job now and accepting that that's my life. I don't think I could do it. I have to achieve. I have to see for myself other things, and and that's the thing. That's the issue with love. Sometimes is I don't know if you can achieve your dreams and chase love at the same time. And I think this movie kind of shows that I think you can. You don't have to decide that you've become a failure. And funny enough, Seth Rogen is one of the people who have said this. If you don't quit, you'll never fail. And watching this movie, it looks like you see two people that quit. They both have hobbies and interests, but Seth doesn't make any music outside of his classroom, so he doesn't enjoy it anymore. And it's easier to just not look at the piano than to delve into it and have that spark and still have that fulfillment in his self. Because truthfully, one thing I always think is I think we all have this fear of being average. But the truth of the matter is nobody can make us feel as great or as superior as we want besides ourselves. We can get a little bit of validation from people, but that shit has to be inside. And it takes me back to one of my favorite movies of, I want to say 2026, right? Marty Supreme came out 2026, didn't it? I think it came out like January, right? But, or no, I'm pretty sure it did because it was in the 2025, yeah, so 2025. But Marty Supreme, was another one of these movies where, you see somebody just say, I can't, that fear of being average. But then at the end, he wins the ping pong match, and it wasn't a televised match, but he proved to his goddamn self that he truly was somebody worthy, and that he was special in his own mind, body, and soul. He felt that. And I think that's the same as getting that outside validation that we all look for. But like I said, when you don't believe in yourself and then there's no outside validation or results from your current life. So yeah, those were my two takeaways from the invite. One was obviously through Seth Rogen's character. I just found myself saying, damn, this is like such a good look into the people, I'd like to say like me, who, like I said, fear that average life so much that you would almost miss the blessings in that average life. A daughter that loves him, a wife that, I think his wife really does love him. Obviously his job isn't the greatest, but some people don't have a job at all. So this is the whole point in a nutshell. We all fear something that is the majority, and that most of us will be. Even as I say that, I don't see that for myself, and that's why I know I wouldn't be happy in this situation, and I'd be like a Seth Rogen where I probably start to resent everything around me, and that just is what it is. And so you wonder, can people like me, can the freaks, almost like a Marty Supreme, actually have love, or do we have to prove it to ourselves first? Because if we don't, then there's a possibility we can end up in one of these marriages where we inevitably resent the fuck out of each other. Which led me to my second biggest takeaway, which is what happens when a couple just stops communicating. What happens when life gets mundane, when the schedule just gets whatever. I don't really like you, you don't really like me, but we don't talk about it. We just kind of, let's not mention it, and one day just know this is probably going to blow up, an extreme caution. But I don't know, man. When two people in a relationship especially just stop communicating completely, whew, man, this movie showed how resentment and perspective is such a big thing with two people. I can completely resent you, you can completely resent me, and we can have two different perspectives, all because we never had a fucking conversation. And it reminded me so much of, like, like I said, like a bank when you know your account's bad and you just don't want to look. I think they both knew everything was bad, and not having sex for a full year is absolutely insane, especially for husband and wife. But when you don't talk about it, and when you don't pretend, and instead you just kind of take jabs at each other, that's possibly what you could get. So let me know what you guys thought of The Invite, man. These were some of my thoughts. And yeah, I guess that's all I really got. The Invite was absolutely dope, and it made me think about a lot of things. And I think it was one of Seth Rogen's best performances. Edward Norton obviously killed it. Penelope Cruz was so natural, so just... It didn't feel like she was acting whatsoever. Olivia Wilde's character, I did find her character get on my fucking nerves the entirety of the movie. Just with like the shy awkwardness. It was just like, I don't know, maybe call me ageist, but I was like, yo, aren't you guys like 40 something? Like, she's Jesus, man. Okay, like you should know how to talk by now at this point in life. Like, oh no, well, that shit did get a little annoying, but like, besides that, I found everybody's character to really be deepful and meaningful. Like I said, especially for my generation, which, I feel like we fear, the average life, and those two were living exactly that, an average life, and so miserable because of that fact. And it was kind of dope to see like what I theorize about myself and what I know a lot of my generation is kind of our foundation, is everybody wants to be special. The truth of the matter is that results are going to be results, and just hope you don't push away a good dude or a good woman because you're not happy in yourself. But what if you can only be happy through proving that shit to yourself? But the thing is like, and it's another takeaway from the movie, is love doesn't mean you have to just stop your dreams. If the love is real, I think you both should be able to allow each other to still achieve and chase your dreams. But what happens when you just give up? And I think that's what this movie is. When you just give up and kind of accept that you're average, what you never wanted to be. Smoke a lot of fucking pot. You make a lot of jokes that are really serious, and sarcastic. We all have somebody like that at work or at home, and they probably are living that life. And maybe that's why my generation fears it so much. We see the guy at the job making jokes, trying to mask it as jokes, but we know he fucking hates this shit and he's miserable. Thanks for watching. I'm out.